Hey guys, it's 75 here and welcome back to another video where today I'm going to be showing you guys what settings can get you the highest FPS and what settings I use. Let's hop right into it. Okay, just before we get into the best settings to maximize your FPS, I'd like to let you guys know that you can import my exact settings from the paste bin link in the description. If you click that, you'll find a bunch of text. You'll want to copy that, come here, click import, and then paste all that right here. And then you'll have my exact settings. Now that we have that out of the way, let's jump right into the best settings to maximize your FPS. Okay, here we are in the settings. We're just gonna go right from the top to the bottom, and I'm gonna let you know which ones you need to use and which ones can impact your FPS. So these top two, you're just gonna wanna choose whichever ones make sense for you. The resolution slider can get you a ton of FPS. So if you're playing on a resolution of 1, you can see in the top left, I'm sitting on around about 60 FPS, which is still pretty okay, but in Krunker, you want as much FPS as possible. So I'm gonna turn that right down to 0.3, and you can see up there, I'm getting roughly 215, 220, and that's while recording, so I'd say that's decent. Below 0.3, it kind of has diminishing returns, so you can see if I put it on 0.1, I'm getting about the same FPS, not really any higher. So it's not worth it. The frame cap here, you pretty much do not want to use, because why would you cap your frames? Like, seriously, there's no reason to do this unless you're like above 800 FPS. This next one is the aspect ratio, which pretty much you just want to have it on native unless you like playing on stretch resolution. The low spec, it can help your FPS out a little bit. If we turn that on, it will take away people's legs. So when the legs aren't being animated, you can get a little bit more FPS. The next one is particles. If you turn this off, it can help your FPS out a decent amount. Basically, particles are in-game effects like these, where if you turn them off, it will stop rendering them, and it can improve your FPS a little bit. These next two are shadows and ambient shading, and if we turn these on, the game just looks better. The shadows are pretty self-explanatory. You can see right here, like this building is casting a shadow, and that's exactly what you'd expect it to do. If we turn the shadows off though, you can see there's still a little bit of darkness around all the edges, and that's what ambient shading does. It adds a little bit of this shading around in between the edges. Let me turn this off so you can see the difference. Now that we have it off, you can see there's no shading in the corners or down here. It's all very flat. Turning both of those off can help your FPS a little bit, so it just depends whether you like them on or off. If you're going in for maximum FPS, go ahead and turn those off. This next one is bullet trails, and this doesn't really hurt your FPS. These are just the trail that the sniper bullet leaves when you shoot it. So as you can see right there, boom, it leaves a trail, and that doesn't really impact your FPS all that much at all. The next one is muzzle flash, and that's pretty self-explanatory. If you take a look at the end of my gun, you can see a flash every once in a while, and if you're going for maximum FPS, go ahead and turn that off. It can impact your FPS just the slightest bit. These next ones, texture and object animations, can really impact your FPS. If you turn these off, you can see my weapon is no longer animated, and neither is like this flag or any of the other object animations. This can raise your FPS up just that little bit more if you need it to. I personally like having them on because I like to look at my fancy contraband skin, and it's not worth those couple frames to not be able to see this. The next section is the interface section. Most of these don't really affect your FPS, so I'll kind of go through them pretty quickly. The UI scale is all up to personal preference. I personally keep mine around 0.3. I'm also on a 5K display, so 0.1 might be the same size as 0.3 for you. The old scoreboard is pretty self-explanatory. It just puts the old scoreboard back with the names in the top right. Dynamic HP bars and show hit indicators can hurt your FPS the tiniest bit, so if you're really going for maximum FPS or you're on a really bad computer, turn those off. Show damage can not only impact your FPS, but also can be distracting for some people, so I personally like to have it on, but if you're going for maximum, turn it off. These next couple are pretty much all up to personal preference. I have them all on, but they're basically chat settings and UI settings. One thing to mention here is this show FPS. You're going to want that on to be able to see your FPS, but it can actually impact your FPS. So if you turn that off, you can get up to 20 to 50 FPS more. You just won't be able to see it. The next one, show movement speed. you're going to want that off because it can impact your FPS pretty negatively. These three are all up to personal preference. The entire crosshair section will not impact your frames per second at all, so go ahead and put this at whatever you like. Personally, I use the precision crosshair with no dot, and you can see all these settings here, but these will all need to be changed depending on your UI scale and your resolution. Gameplay is pretty much just sensitivity settings, all up to personal preference. I'm going to skip over controller since I don't use controller. Audio is all up to personal preference, doesn't affect your FPS. Okay, so finally on to some more things that can impact your FPS. The field of view and weapon field of view, you can turn those to whatever you like. Personally, I use 120 on both because it lets you see the most. The weapon bobbing and leaning can be a bit distracting for me, but some people like them. You can adjust these to be whatever you want. These are basically where your gun sits. Hide weapon on ADS can help your FPS if you turn this on, and show hands is basically personal preference. I do not think that it impacts your FPS really at all. These next couple can though. If we look in game here, if I, let's say, walk up to a corner so we're not moving, stable around 300, and if I turn my weapon off here, you can see that immediately jumps up to around 320, and that can be even more dramatic when I'm not recording. So turning these off can really help your FPS. If you're struggling for FPS, definitely turn your show weapon off. And an easy way to do that is if you go into the controls here and you bind toggle weapon visibility to a key, you can easily be in game and turn that on and off with that key. That's pretty much all of those. Let's move on to editing. Now, nearly all of these are up to personal preference, but there are a couple I'd like to mention. The saturation for me, I would love to turn up, but as you can see, this is saturation 1. I'm currently at a little under 200 FPS, which is kind of bad, but if I move that saturation slider at all, even to 1.1, it immediately caps my FPS at 60 or even 50 right now, it looks like, which I have no idea why it's doing this. If y'all could let me know, that'd be great, because I would love to have the saturation up in game. It just for some reason bumps my FPS all the way down to 50, 60, which is really annoying. And I've tried all different sorts of clients and basically everything, but you do have to keep in mind that I'm on Mac, so that might be an issue. All of you fellow Mac users, let me know if this is an issue for you or if it's just me. But anyway, saturation can affect your FPS even if you're not having the same issue as me. There's really no reason to change these color hues things. They just look kind of ridiculous, to be honest. The vignette can add a black border around your game. For some reason it's not working for me right now, but usually it adds like a black kind of haze around the corners of your screen. There's really no reason to have that on. These chat settings are all up to you. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the editing section. Moving on to the customization setting. These are all pretty much up to you. Some of them can affect your FPS, so that's why I have none of them filled in right now, but on the download of my settings that is in the description, most of these are going to be filled in with some custom ones that I made. If you're going for maximum FPS, you're going to want to turn use damage overlay off. It won't change your FPS when you're not damaged, but when you do get damaged, your screen can kind of turn red, and that can lower your FPS as much as 100 FPS lower than when you aren't damaged. So that can be pretty dramatic for some people, but personally I have it on even though it affects my FPS so badly, just because I'm used to it, and I feel like I would play much worse because I can kind of gauge my health with how red the screen is. So personally I keep it on. And yeah, that is gonna do it for the settings in KRUNKER. Remember that if you want to use my exact settings, you can go down into the description. I'll have a link where you can get the text for my settings. You're gonna copy it all, paste it in here, and hit OK. And yeah, that's gonna do it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed or if this helped you out, be sure to leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, I've got some bangers for the future. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!